It's much easier when you're having these conversations in community. And I think parenting in isolation here in the States is part of what it makes it so profoundly difficult, exhausting, and overwhelming to be a parent in the US. And
just a bit more on this fertility stuff. It is the Ezra Klein podcast. It's the latest one. I'm not going to include it in the fertility video. I'll put it in some other video. But yeah, I need to. It's one of those podcasts where you want to respond to every single thing they say, but then the video will be like, I don't know, 12 hours long. And so I don't need a 12-hour video. I don't even need a 12-minute video, apparently. But anyway, I'm going to play a few seconds of this so I can properly set everything up so that it's clear that I'm not taking them out of context. But I want to at least just respond to this. So this is 22 and a half minutes into the podcast. And again, there's just so many other things I want to respond to, but I've chosen to narrow it down to this.
Some of that more that's going on. So in your book, you discuss two competing, not just pressures, but archetypes that are weighing on parents nowadays. So one is the ideal worker norm, and the other is the good mother, good father, good parent norm. So tell me about those and how they conflict.
so the ideal worker norm.
And just to say, no, it's not that the whole podcast is disagreeable. They actually went over all these countries that did a bunch of things to try to raise their fertility rate and failed. So it's a good kind of chronicle of the failed attempts many nation states have undertaken that have not boosted their fertility rate and that have just kind of, taxed a bunch of people.
This is a term coined by Joan Acker. The ideal worker norm is the idea that adults today should be fully committed and entirely devoted to their jobs and their employers, available at a moment's notice, unencumbered by external responsibilities that might diminish from their ability to perform their jobs well. And competing with this ideal.
Okay, so Joan Acker, I've never read Joan Acker, but you don't have to read Joan Acker to understand why this is just a dodgy kind of framing, because it's presented, at least the way she presents it here, as some external thing, the ideal worker norm. No, it's just the case. Employers want to make their lives as convenient as possible in terms of their employees having these last-minute issues where they call in sick or book off too often. So the ideal worker norm is just bound up with the fact that as a worker, you're probably going to have an employer. And so why would employers want less reliable people than more reliable people? It's not some staple of the culture. It's just baked into the necessity of employers. Obviously, if they can have a choice between a familially uncommitted person versus a familially committed person, they're going to choose the former because it's to their advantage. It's as simple as that, especially for an employer who's involved in maybe scheduling shift work, not these careers where it's like if you call in sick last minute, it's not a problem. But for those of us who are more in the work world of shifts, whereas like if someone doesn't show up, the other person can't leave, you're at a workstation or something like that. Obviously, it's not some cultural force, this ideal worker norm. It's just, no, you just want reliable people. Like I've gotten away with so much at work in terms of just my disinterest in helping out beyond what is kind of contractually mandated of me. And I don't have much of a decent attitude just about the contract, and I'm more outspoken about the ways management fails. And yet I face no repercussions. Why? And why did I even get my third day off? Back when I demanded for it and it was kind of a back and forth thing. But then by 2021, yeah, I got it. Why did I get that? It's because they know I'm one of the reliable people. I'm going to show up there 4 nights a week. I'm going to do what is contractually mandated of me. And then I'm going to go home and I'm not going to cause any kind of headaches. But notably, not with this book out stuff. It's like, yeah, I have my vacations and that's it. It's just so freaking obvious. It doesn't have to be a cultural force. It's in the nature of what an employer needs, that the less kind of calamity there is in a person's personal life, the less of it there is, the more reliable they're going to be as a worker. And if I had kids, it's clear I wouldn't be anywhere near as reliable. Because you see other colleagues, those with kids versus those without kids, very often when someone books out, it's the kid got sick or there's some other kind of drama involving the kid that's last minute. You find out about it in the morning when you wake up. So you do a last minute book off or whatever. I'll use one of the sick days or something like that. But, it often exceeds the amount of sick days allotted to you. And then especially in this shift world of work where someone booking off means that other person has to stay. That's a huge headache. It's nothing to do with a cultural expectation of the ideal worker norm. That's just your guy's cognitive shortcut. Because you don't spend enough time thinking about those who do shifts. And how, having familial obligations usually means there's going to be a person who's going to be very pissed off when someone books off last minute, because that means they're going to have to stay beyond what they're required to, or leave their post abandoned. And when a post goes abandoned, depending on just how sensitive the nature of the work is, but in some cases, having a post go abandoned means there's going to be people without power if it's, high liability enough nature of the work. So it makes perfect sense that employers and other kinds of, crown corporation bigwigs, they would kind of select for people with less post-work obligations. It's nothing to do with a cultural expectation. It's just each individual employer can have this be a part of their calculus without any kind of cultural inputs, externally speaking. But they can't figure this out. They think because they're, they quote sociologists, because of course sociologists just attribute so much to quote unquote the culture as this, amorphous entity. But I'm going to go on about that later.
The worker is, as you said, this intensive parenting norm. And often we talk about it as an intensive mothering norm because it is primarily mothers who take on the lion's share of domestic work in households today. Yes.
They choose to. They can, at least in those parts of the world where abortions are permitted legally, they can choose to avoid all that. And not just in terms of work, but just what it does to the body. Like as a woman, what the pregnancy does to your body, both internally and then externally, how you look. It's not everyone bounces back like As Woman did. It's so hard for me to believe that As Woman had like 4 kids. She really, really bounced back. But like the typical woman can't bounce back that way. Or, the typical trans man who gets pregnant. See, I'm inclusive.
Decades past did less than men today do. There has been an increase in the amount of time men spend caregiving compared to previous generations of men. But there's still a large gap between the amount of time men and women spend doing childcare and housework today.
So one of the things that should be said here is just each person should think back to when they were a really, really young kid, maybe even before toddlerhood, to the extent that you have the vaguest semblance of a memory. Did you want your dad to be around when you were really young and about as vulnerable as it can get? Did you want your dad to be around you often, or was it really important that your mommy was going to be around? It was going to be really important that your mommy was going to be around, in part because of breastfeeding, but in another part, I think this can be argued for. Maybe I'll look up some evidence after I'm done recording this, because I'm sure evidence for it exists. But yeah, for really young children, like 1 or 2 years old, it's just important that mommy be there, not daddy. And it's all feeling. It's got nothing to do with the knowing parts of our nature. This is all like the willing parts of our nature. Make it so. And so yes, I'm not gonna blame men for kind of taking that cue and thus being around less. But I'm gonna go 15 seconds back into this because it's when I press play, it like misses a second before it starts playing. It's very annoying. I need a new laptop.
Decades past did less than men today do. There has been an increase in the amount of time men spend caregiving compared to previous generations of men. But
it shouldn't be 50-50 if you know what it's like. If you have those vaguest, kind of semblance of memories, like who actually wanted their daddy to be around? Like you can't suck you can't suck the milk out of your dad's tits. It's just, unless it's one of those, again, trans situations. But yeah, it makes perfect sense that women would be around, that the maternity leave thing would be more common than paternity leave. And try to suck your dad's nipples, you're probably going to get his disgusting hair bits in your mouth. Like Stewie did that one time. Remember when Stewie... See, this is like, I don't even know what formed my kind of tangents and humor sensibilities, but it is kind of growing up on these cartoons like Family Guy and stuff. When Stewie freaking was breastfed by Peter when Peter wanted to be a woman and get in touch with his womanly ways. And I remember there was just one hilarious scene. It was like Stewie just had that hair in his mouth. And, these are the kinds of things that they creep up on me. I don't have them in mind when I start recording the audio, but to the extent that I want to make the audio a bit funny, it's like I think I'm making up my own stuff, but then I think a little more deeply and I realize, oh no, this cartoon did that first, and I just kind of forgot about it. But the more I do these kinds of audios, these quasi-comedic audios, the more I catch myself because, oh, no, you saw that in a cartoon a long time ago. In this case, 25 years ago.
Between the amount of time men and women spend doing childcare and housework today. And this intensive mothering norm suggests that, as you might guess, child rearing should be time-intensive, emotionally involved, and child-centered or child-focused, such that what it means to be a good mother is to be self-sacrificing, to devote yourself entirely to your children's well-being. And
yes, build a nest like all the insects that Shop talks about brilliantly that I think I would have done by the time I'm going to upload this. I would have uploaded that video as well.
Upbringing. And you can imagine why...
Be the insect. It's really noble to be like an insect.
These two cultural norms...
Or other animals. It doesn't just have to be insects. With insects, it's just most glaring that, they're self-sacrificing. They have no fucking idea what it's about because the offspring hasn't even hatched yet, but they're building the nest in advance. Do they know what they're doing? Of course not. They don't think.
Are in distinct tension with one another. It is categorically impossible to be an ideal worker and an ideal mother at the same time. And so abundant.
Yeah, so this is ultimately what motivated the audio. So enough progs are now kind of slowly catching up to the fact that it's impossible to be the ideal parent and the ideal worker, where it's like it crops up in no one's mind that the real tension here should be ideal thinker versus whatever other practical domain of life that you have to, be engaged in. You have to participate in life to some extent, but really, the more noble of a mind you have, the less you're going to want to do that, and the more you're going to want to just interrogate life, analyze life, evaluate life from the armchair, right? So here they've kind of caught on to this. The culture is so far behind that the culture is now slowly but surely getting around to this. There's a conflict between being the ideal parent versus the ideal worker, and we're going to talk about it. But it's like, what about being the ideal thinker? It doesn't even crop up as one of the things that requires hard trade-offs is the mission toward becoming an ideal thinker. Now, I haven't heard the podcast fully, and so if they do bring this up, this really kind of what the noble mind would go to, it's like, how can I become the ideal thinker? What other areas of my life am I going to have to self-sacrifice in such that I can devote more time to just these, thinking for thinking's sake style activities? 24 minutes and 21 seconds into the podcast now, so I'm not saying they haven't, it's inevitable that they won't get to that, but I'm 99% sure it will not occur to either of them. Well, what about becoming the ideal thinker? What about that? Is it a two-way thing here, or is it a three-way thing here between work, family, and thinking? No, I guarantee you they'll just keep it between work and family. That's as far as even the kind of proggy podcast is able to get to. And I'm just tired of it. I appreciate Ezra Klein's podcast for being wonkish. I like wonkishness, but too many wonkish people just, they can't. They can't step outside themselves, it seems. They are of the Volk as well. Even though they're wonkish, they're still too Volk-ish. I like that. But, I'm sure if they do say something, I would have incorporated here. If they say something about becoming the ideal thinker, then I'll just take shots at myself through text, as I've kind of habitually come to do with these, most recent videos. This is how you know I don't have that much to say, because it's a phone recording. I can do a clip show, actually. Maybe I should if I have the stamina to do a clip show. Just the kind of funniest out of context utterings from this podcast. Maybe with the backdrop of some funny, wacky song. It would work. But for now, let's just a bit deeper into the podcast now, and it's going to be short. It actually, you know what? It is like one of those out of context drops, but I might have some witticism to add to it.
But it doesn't matter how many policy supports I have. The fact that my job is very intensive and demanding, and caring for my daughter is very intensive and demanding, is a tension that I don't think can be resolved by even the best set of policies and resources. And in truth, it's just because parenting is hard, right? Both the time and the resources necessary to do.
Making your voice squeaky as you admit it, and admit it in very kind of rhetorically tame terms. But yeah, making your voice squeaky doesn't, it's not gonna, you're not gonna fool all the people all the time. No, it's not hard. It's fucking hard. And if you got a brain to you, not worth it.
Are kind of non-negotiable. What I would really love is to live in some sort of co-housing community.
Here we go.
Where my dear friends who I want to co-parent with share, for example, a communal kitchen, and we rotate meals and cleaning responsibilities, because the isolation of feeling like my partner and I are raising our kid without community support, to me, is part of why this feels so exhausting.
Oh, see, now you're really talking my language. All I want here is to move to a future of utopian co-parenting communes.
Yeah, see that little... I know he doesn't want that, but, that's the kind of drawback of having a lot of guests, is you can't really build a genuine, sincere rapport with them. There was a guy on Joe Rogan a week ago or so, and it was just really awkward, because, there's a prime example of Rogan. So he has this variety of guests, and they're kind of pseudo-friendly, but you see in a case like that, I think he was talking something COVID-wise, and you just see they have no chemistry at all. And so this is kind of a case where I don't believe, Ezra, you would want that, but the sarcasm is even hard to decode in this case. But yeah, just listen to what you said here.
Let's make it happen. That's a feeling like my housing community, where my dear friends who I want to co-parent with share, for example, a communal kitchen, and we rotate meals and clean.
I mean, it's just no mystery why I've never befriended a parent as an adult. I guess adult time onward is when you can kind of plausibly befriend a parent, and it's not like I've befriended a lot of people's sons' parents, no, but every single person I've befriended as an adult has been a non-parent, and this kind of talk really makes that clear. It's like it's not my bad. It's their bad. Parents are creepy. They're either creepy because they want this kind of crap, or because they're these moms of liberty who are ultra paranoid and ultra possessive of their children's brains and minds, or there's going to be something else. To the extent that they've stepped in it for the long haul.
Responsibilities, because the isolation of feeling like my partner and I are raising our kid without community support, to me, is part of why
they want your support. I went back a bit, but yeah, they want your support, and they ought not get it. I mean, they probably don't want your support. They probably want, the most they want from you is taxes, some more of your taxes to go to their Begetter projects. But yeah, not to the extent what she just described. What the frightening kind of thing she just described, I don't mean to be, to portray them inaccurately. They only want that next level help from their friends and other loved ones. They don't want that from their ideological foes, although they do not shy away from wanting to tax their ideological foes so that, they have those policies in place as well for their leave from work, which they think they're entitled to. Which, to the extent that there's any kind of justification for those policies, it's just so that the kids are better off. So yes, tax me if you can prove definitively that the kid will in every single case be better off. Then I'm happy to pay the taxes, even though I know that I'm incentivizing something bad long-term probably. I don't care about that. I care about kids who currently exist. So I'm even willing to help out, but I just don't think that you can definitively prove, just as they made the mistake with birth rates in all these countries, that one thing that's admirable in this podcast is that they did cover in kind of impressive detail all the countries that, though they tried to incentivize boosting the fertility rate, they were unsuccessful. And likewise, I think with some of those programs that tax non-parents more to the benefit of parents and their kids, I just don't know if those benefits always roll over to the kids as much as they should to justify the policy. But anyway, I'm on a tangent. I wanted to go back a bit and play this part again.
To a future of utopian Co-parenting communes. That's my actual solution to all this.
And here comes another frightening part.
Right, and that means we have to change the structure, the architecture of our homes and our neighborhoods. We have to think creatively and expansively about what it means.
We have to reimagine structures.
To create families for ourselves that give us the support and the meaning and fulfillment that we all both need and deserve.
Yeah, terrestrial meaning, right? Not cosmic meaning, but terrestrial meaning. Oh, what? You guys haven't read Benatar? Oh, okay. I'm shocked.
You've had an episode before about what kind of relationships you would have if you could choose them, right? You've had episodes about polyamory and folks who are
Yeah, one way to get further to that is to just not become a begetter. But instead, you guys are arguing for a kind of begetter expansionism. Yeah, there we go. That's cool. I might call this segment Begetter Expansionism Debunked. But yeah, you guys want to reimagine everything. Let's just go back here.
Right? You and I were just supposed to give us
Co-parenting communes.
Yes, right. Let's make it happen.
That's my actual solution to all this.
Right, and that means we have to change the structure, the architecture of our homes and our neighborhoods. We have to think creatively and expansively about what it
expansively, yeah. Begetter expansionism.
means to create families for ourselves that give us the support and the meaning and fulfillment that we all both need and deserve. You've had an episode before about what kind of relationships you would have if you could choose them, right? You've had episodes about polyamory.
Yeah, how do you not see that the first step that gets you as far away from that as possible, and both your kid, right? Your kid doesn't choose you, and you're not going to choose how your kid is going to be. It's just so obvious that that's the last thing you do is become a begetter if you care about the kind of relationships you can choose versus not choose. But it falls on deaf ears over and over. All right, this is probably going to be too long to extract now. Yes, I still haven't bought a new camcorder. Cursed me and my procrastinating ways. Another clip here, and the first thing he's going to say is, I do wonder if there's a way in which, but those few seconds will probably get swallowed up because when I press play, if it's been long enough since I pressed stop, it just swallows the first couple of seconds of the things they say after I press play. But let's see if it does it this time. So he's supposed to say, I do wonder if there's a way in which.
There's a way in which digital media and social media and everything else has created across a lot of domains a preference for highly negative conversations. Everything in politics is terrible. Parenting is terrible. I'm super anxious,
Yeah, so he says social media, my favorite term. He used my favorite term, social media. But, remember the old dinosaur media motto, if it bleeds, it leads? Why would we have expected that it would have been different in quote-unquote social media? No, it's the same motto. It works on the lizard brain, and it's all about attracting the lizard brain. So that gets you clicks.
We're seeing a big teen mental health crisis. And I do wonder sometimes if it hasn't become harder to talk about anything being good, right? If you say something is good, you have to confess your privilege in 6 different ways before you do so.
No, that really kind of gives me a glimpse as to what kind of company you're keeping. See, I'm never in a position where I have to say something as stupid as, oh, I confess my privilege or any of that crap. The fact that you summarize it the way you do suggests to me that you tolerate a lot of people in your life, Ezra, that you should not tolerate. And you're too good for. I'm being very snarky to you, Ezra, throughout this video, but truth is, I still respect you for being a wonk. I still do, despite all your kind of boneheaded thoughtlessness surrounding this topic. And I should dig into the archives on this podcast because it's not new. He's been thoughtless and unskeptical on the begetting subject for a long time, but now I've spoken for too long, so it's probably gonna swallow a couple of seconds once I press play. Let's see if it does. Yep.
Thinking when you're telling that story about your daughter, there's actually.
But yeah, the privilege thing.
It hasn't
the privilege thing. I just want to mock it again and play it again.
Become harder to talk about anything being good, right? If you say something is good, you have to confess your privilege and.
No, define you. No, you maybe, but not people who don't suffer fools well and who don't tolerate fools in their lives, as you shouldn't either. You're too good for it, Ezra. Why can't you see yourself in as positive a light as I see you, such that you believe that you're too good to suffer fools?
In 6 different ways before you do so. Yeah, I was just thinking when you're telling that story about your daughter, there's actually nobody in the world in the entire world, and I have like the most doting mother. I have friends who adore me. I have a great marriage. Nobody in the world is nicer to me than my 5-year-old. Nobody is more purely nice to me than he is.
What a beautiful statement.
And it's just not something I talk about that much. I do wonder, to Rachel's point.
I mean, every now and then it's just, you can just play what they say and not even feel the need to respond.
One of the things that operates in the background here is just like this enormous crushing guilt. I think I'm a pretty good parent. I try really hard. I have a very close relationship with my kids. I just constantly feel guilty. And they make me feel guilty, to be fair. They're very good at that. And then...
Yeah, all the laughter is just what I'll never understand. Do you guys get that it's a nervous laughter, at least in part? Because you know you're not being fully honest with yourselves? The possibility that maybe all this guilt you've invited into your lives is unnecessary. I was supposed to stop. I was supposed to end this and not keep piling onto it, but I guess I can't. Oh, Ezra, I just can't quit you.
To be fair, they're very good at that. And then I also feel guilty sometimes at work. I'm pretty good at my job, but you know, like everything is just, you're always making choices taken from one or the other to say then nothing of how often.
I remember what it was like to feel guilty over work-related stuff. Nowadays, it only happens if I accept extra responsibility out of, indeed, guilt.
Am I calling my family? Am I showing up for my friends, right? It's not possible.
What are these friends and family obligations you speak of? It sounds completely alien to me. As it should be to the whole world. If it sounded completely alien to the whole world would be a lot more de-stressed and probably all these, conflicts, groupie conflicts. If people just didn't have as much social guilt and I guess familial, maybe genetic-based guilt, like you gotta be better to those you're genetically related to, you gotta be better to them, even if you hate them more than those non-genetic people, right? If people just didn't feel guilt, yeah, some things would probably be worse, but when you look at all the groupie warfare kind of things, you gotta know that there'd be a lot less participants in those groupie kind of things, and at least on that level, things would be better. But anyway, this is not the theme of this video, so sorry for that tangent.
As well as you want to do it. Am I taking care of myself? I was so impressed that you sometimes make your bed like that. That sounds wonderful. But...
it probably is about as useless as procreation to think you gotta make your bed. I mean, what the hell? What is your bedroom, like a fashion runaway or something like that? One of those things where you can actually make money the more people are impressed with how nicely your bed is made? No. It's just one of those kind of whips that's completely misplaced. And yet, how many people do you think would actually be able to agree if I tell them making your bed is just one of those self-imposed whips that's just, yeah, it's about as useless as guilt over not being there for people who are probably not there for you either.
You must really time rich to be making your bed daily. Rachel Cohen at Vox had a really interesting piece a couple months back about how millennials are coming to dread motherhood and parenthood and how the sort of dominant...
I mean, wasn't this a thing in second wave feminism too? It's just always presented as something new, even though it's got these intergenerational intervals, right? I mean, it's just like half of the 60s, half of the issues was this, right? It's like, I don't know if I just want to be a stay-at-home mom. I think I want to do other stuff as well. And they started burning their bras and all these other kinds of antics. And now this is just a different flavor of that. I can't believe that people who are pretty impressive at least on a memory standpoint, like he memorizes a whole lot of stats, and yet he presents this whole, we're going to be a little skeptical and wary of motherhood. He presents it as some new thing. It's not new. All these conversations are just retreads of old conversations. And back to doing this audio style instead of recording my screen from my phone. I've overwhelmed my phone, so I have to go back to it's just one more clip from the podcast I have, and then I'm done. And then I'm going to move on to those older clips that'll fill out the rest of the video. But I just have to do one more thing. And I think this is a first, by the way, where I start out responding to something as audios and then I shift to doing it as a recording my laptop screen. And then I migrate back to doing it audio style. I didn't want to, I just have to because I've overwhelmed my phone when it comes to recordings, and I'm out of space because the actual visual stuff takes up more space than the audio stuff. It's another kind of secret nugget of wisdom for people who don't have storage capacity, but they do a lot of videos. It's like just do audios instead. It'll eat up less space on your PC or whatnot. But yeah, I have one more clip to record, and then I'm moving on to the rest of this very long video. One more clip to record as a response to this podcast, and here it goes. It's Ezra.
I wonder about the values, but there is something that, when you observe it at a population level, about this question of societies that understand themselves as in continuity, cultures that understand themselves as about what comes after them, and cultures that are highly individualistic, highly built around not just individual choice, but individual satisfaction, such that...
Yeah, and so just one thing that I'd like to see more people recognize and appreciate and incorporate in terms of how they actually use language is that every single prepackaged political theory or whatever other kind of, organizational thing that requires like mutual cooperation, like every single thing that's on the table, there's no such thing as a straightforwardly individualistic one versus a straightforwardly collectivist one. Each one has bits and pieces of it that may be individualistic, like maybe on the fiscal side, the pocketbook side, they're more individualistic, but then usually on the social side, they won't be, or vice versa, depending on the theory you have in mind. And I don't see that really recognized. We're still using these theories in this kind of retro way where, theories that have certain individualistic things going for them are not recognized as such because those individualistic aspects are in the social world only.
It makes a ton of sense to ask the question, is having children going to make me happier? Will it be a more pleasant or less pleasant choice for the next 7 years? And if the...
Well, I think you meant like 18 or 21 years, but okay.
Answer is less pleasant.
And realistically, it's not like parents emotionally switch off once their child is now 21 and a fully fledged adult and, autonomous. Oh, my child's autonomous now. So if my child fucks up, it's not going to bother me as much as it would if my child were, 13. It's like, no, it's still going to really bother you. Don't pretend that this autonomy thing in familial context, don't pretend that this autonomy thing is somehow makes you feel less responsible if your child's a mass murderer. No, you're probably going to feel rather responsible if you've created a monster, whether that monster is 13, 21, 61. I'd feel every bit as responsible.
Maybe that's a good reason not to do it. And it's funny because on any individual level, like, I think that choice is totally fine to make. And then when you see it happening across a society, you begin to wonder, well, like, what...
This is the choice to not be a begetter, right? So now he's kind of thinking, well, what if too many people don't become begetters?
Do I think of a society that just doesn't value children on their own merits that much? Because...
Well, no, right? Because just as I said, when I talked about how you can tax me if those benefits accrue to the children in a straightforward kind of way, and not in some kind of 50-50 benefits accruing to the parents and only 50% accrues to the children, right? So just as I said there, no, a society that doesn't value begetting is still a society that can value extant children. This is yet another one of those apples and oranges things, but that's very controversial, and I can imagine some counterpoints to this. But I truly believe in the end, we can split this atom in a clean enough kind of way. But he doesn't seem to think that that's doable. Like, if you don't incentivize begetting, you're therefore anti-child. I don't think that's true at all. I'll think of some great analogy a bit later, but I'm mentally worn out now, so I can't kind of defend this with analogies the way I normally do. So I'll just let him kind of finish here and see if I have any other remark to say once he's done.
Because it's kind of a pain in the butt for a lot of the adults.
It does make you wonder. And to be honest with you, Ezra, as a sociologist, as a feminist, I don't really care about our total fertility rate as a policy target. If you asked me, I would tell you we should open up our borders and let immigration solve our quote-unquote fertility problem.
Okay, so, I guess this is kind of a lackluster ending to my critiquing this podcast because now it's no longer really... The craziness is no longer the sort of craziness that I started out being critical of them on. Now they've migrated into this whole other kind of craziness about opening the border. The border is pretty much, for all intents and purposes, it's not fully closed. It's kind of only semi-closed. But I don't want I don't want to make this video about that, so sorry for the lackluster kind of ending. But yeah, I think it should not be that controversial to say you can be anti-begetting without being anti-child, right? It's not like I didn't write it in any kind of stone that children grow up and become non-children as adults. That's not how I, like, if I could create the universe from scratch, I would just keep us all as children. Right? We just age to a certain point and we just stop aging. We like stop aging at 12, pre-puberty. And then we get to remain as children. But the fact that children become non-children, the fact that children become adults, like, therefore that itself means you're anti-child if you are not for the incentivization of begetting, because it is only through begetting that we can create more children once those initial children grow up. It's like, yeah, I guess on that level, if you take that line, then I am anti-child, but I don't think that's a fair line to take. So I won't take it. And I'm just going to kind of reiterate. There's a difference between anti-begetting and anti-child. You don't have to be anti-child. Although I am kind of anti-child. I have very low tolerance for children. I can hang around them for maybe like 5-10 minutes and then they just get boring. And the younger they are, especially, maybe even less than 10 minutes, the younger they are, the fewer minutes I can spend around them without finding them just tedious and needy. Children are very needy. But like a typical anti-begetter doesn't have to be anti-children, right? I happen to be anti-children as well, just from a proximity standpoint. Like, children are awesome if you just kind of watch them in as characters in shows and stuff like that. But if you actually have to be around them, they have an expiration date. I'm not especially afraid of a lifeless world. And that's the problem. People are especially afraid of it. Just look at it, all these panicky birth rates are plummeting in the West types. And just going on and never being challenged. Really, nowhere can I see them being challenged in the podcast-istan, as Sam Harris calls it. They just so clearly believe that it's okay to instrumentalize individuals along the lines of nationalist projects or just kind of nation state persisting over time projects. And we're just going to, in these procreative manners, instrumentalize individuals so we can have them be the next round of taxpayers for our nation. So our nation can outcompete the other bad nations like China. Stuff like this. Even the proggy podcast-istan never questions this when this kind of birth rate alarmism comes up. As in birth rate's moral alarmism. They never question it. It's like, okay, it's time to take conservatives seriously because this is probably their most valid concern. It's like, I don't think it's their most valid concern. So it's the places where they're supposed to be the most sharp and kind of biting when it comes to their direct political foes, they go easiest on them. Because yeah, it is the MAGAs for the most part, the current DNA of the GOP, that are bolstering a lot of this birth rates alarmism, when it's just so clear it's about the future of America. So it's so clear they believe in the instrumentalization of individuals for their freaking legal fictions. But they think America is much more than a legal fiction, so I can't summarize it that way. They think America is a gift from God to the world. But, we're still going to go ahead and be isolationist, even though we're a gift from God to the world. Yeah, it's them. It's Team Red that are the worst kinds of alarmists when it comes to this birth rate crap. And just, also thinking themselves more individualistic at the same time. It's like you're willing to politicize your concerns for serving the fucking species, a collective, and you think you're the more individualistic team. No, the fuck you're not. It is just so glaring nowadays. I mean, even the libertarian types, like Brian Kaplan, I can screenshot so much of his stuff from Twitter alone. It's just so brazen about wanting to social engineer this part of social reality so that you can, manipulate essentially, but he would say motivate, give incentives to, but no, really. So they're okay using social engineering to manipulate couples who would have otherwise remained childless and to no longer make them childless. The libertarians are every bit as alarmist on birth rates as people who self-identify as Republican, people who register to vote Republican are. These are two sides of the same fucking coin, and it's just so glaring and brazen now. But it's really galling with fucking people who think of themselves as libertarians. I'm a libertarian who wants to manipulate people through social engineering that I'll
put lipstick on and call incentives to manipulate people who clearly wouldn't have had children and who would have remained child-free, but if you want to say childless with a little sad violin playing. And yeah, we'll use any tools at our disposal, whether it's NGOs or, if all these other interest groups that we dislike are using state subsidies, then we'll be completely okay using state subsidies to aid toward this kind of social engineering. The reason there's just such oaths that it's so clear that I'm paraphrasing this the right way, the reason is just mere sincerity. You just have to look at yourself. You have to look internally, and you have to pay attention to the processes. What kind of stuff motivates you to serve the species versus to be prudential in your own individualistic way without much concern as to any kind of group, whether that's the nation state or in this case, the species. It takes mere sincerity. FOMO, probably every single individual has at one point or another felt FOMO toward a particular thing. It was the thing with me, maybe adolescence, maybe into youth, but, hankering down by probably 20. But it would really be those days when the weather was nice. And so I felt a kind of FOMO unless I seized on the day during the nice weather day. And so I feel a kind of FOMO, but at every step along the way, I knew that wasn't, whatever was guiding me there to feel that FOMO it wasn't my mind. It wasn't the best of my mind. And as I've since come to find by reading a lot of Shop, it's the will. The will leads you to feel FOMO. And the will is blind, irrational, insatiable, ever striving. And Shop would argue in terms of what's existentially real, it is original. But you don't have to sign up for that for the purposes of my point here. You can just see that a blind force is the same kind of thing that inspires instinct, drives you to be concerned just at that conceptual analytic level for a far future that's lifeless and thinking it bad. It's the same kind of low concern that as a youth and as a teenager maybe leads you to feel FOMO when it's a really nice day and you're not playing sports or something. It's that kind of striving after the chimerical instead of the real that's at the bottom of it. And it just takes mere sincerity to see it springs from the same spot. It's X risk and all these concerns over birth rates. This is just collectivist FOMO. It's an existential collectivist FOMO that these people are partaking in. Think about it. I just stipulated this in my own thought experiment internally a second ago, but now I want to actually add it to this, but I didn't think this would be a part of this because it's technically different. Think about it. We stipulate to them there's a gajillion years of maybe not blissful lives, but, sufficiently good or great lives. You throw in a lot of meaning, you throw in a lot of perseverance, all the stuff they care about that's kind of non-welfarist. You throw all that into the soup and you just say, there's a gajillion years, that's the number I picked in my thought experiment. There's a gajillion years of those types of lives. We can stay, biologically similar to how we are now. So it can just be that many generations for a gajillion years. Or we can enhance biologically, bioenhancement, all that kind of stuff. So there's fewer generations, but individuals get to live longer, whichever way you want to, split that salad. But then after the gajillionth year passes, extinction kicks in, and it's swift and painless, and everyone just goes poop. The sun burns out, so the world goes poop when the sun burns out. As stipulated to be a gajillion years, and no one lives. No one dips below whatever we construe as sufficiency, and let's say no one even gets close to it because everyone lives these great and kind of ideal lives for a gajillion years. It's guaranteed. You just got to sign the contract, the existential contract. But the price tag for that contract is at the end, yes, there is extinction, and you eventuate extinction by signing this contract. If you don't sign the contract, we don't know what happens from here on out, right? But you built into the contract that there's a gajillion years of great living, which can include procreation, as often as it happens now. A gajillion years of great living, but then you eventuate extinction through the contract in this just really roundabout, long-sighted way. But your signing the contract does eventuate extinction, right? And so the purpose of this is to show how stupid it would be not to sign that contract. And that fret over the lifeless world is felt equally intensely by the individual living right now as it would be by that individual who's living in that final gajillionth year and the final minute who's just advised that, it will be a lifeless world from here on out because the sun's going to burn out. that kind of fretting, that kind of collectivist FOMO would be felt identically by that future individual in this thought experiment. Because we can never feel the length of the past. Even if you tell the individual, there's been a gajillion lives, they've all been great for a gajillion years, there's been more than a gajillion lives, plausibly. And this is just how much time has passed. No, that person will still feel the sting of FOMO because that's where people are mentally all their life long. They are where you and I were, as adolescents maybe, when we felt that kind of ordinary FOMO at a particular object, like a nice cloudless day in the summer, and God, I really want to have fun playing sports today. And if it doesn't go down on this particular day, I'm going to feel bad. But like, there's no reason to feel bad. You just got to wisen the fuck up. So these people refuse to wisen the fuck up because they can't get they can't get a handle on their collectivist FOMO. And so they go around worrying about birth rates and clearly running afoul of their own basic tenets of their political philosophies by willing to socially engineer other groups of people to get them to act in accordance with serving the species, when it's not what those individuals would have chosen on their own accord. And then they pat themselves on the back, people like Brian Kaplan, for believing that, oh yeah, each individual should chart their own course. Well, clearly you don't believe that. If you're this fucking panicked, if you're this especially afraid of meagerly falling birth rates. You're not just ordinarily afraid, you're especially afraid. Well, I'm not afraid of that. I'm not afraid of a lifeless world, neither ordinarily nor especially. And you all look like silly children to me, silly children who are taken in by stuff like FOMO and that need to seize the day, that kind of silly existential adventurism. And you'll talk circles around, there's the basic statement. The basic statement is you believe life has no price tag. You believe it doesn't matter how bad it can possibly get. The lifeless world is necessarily worse. It's like a cult. It's like a cult with which there's no bargaining, and they don't even see that they're the hardliner ones. But I love this. Life is good because life helps us answer the challenge of life. If you really look at it, if you really look at why they want to maybe take it further beyond these birth rates only concerns and, just make it existential and philosophical. The common denominator in all their arguments defending their crap and their collateral damage, the endless tolerance for collateral damage, the common denominator is these arguments that boil down to life is good because life helps us answer the challenge of life. Wow. I guess if you're so inclined, you can even crop this audio. This got a summary because so many arguments, that's the common denominator. That's really the edifice of the arguments. Life is good because life helps us answer the challenge of life. And so if you just want to crop the audio as a kind of stand-in generic response, mocking anytime someone writes something out to you, who's, the edifice ultimately boils down to life's good because it helps us answer the challenge of life. It's that thought process unspoken. It's essentially what you get every single time. But no, I guess that's not the end of the video because I often amend lyrics when I jog or just when I listen to music because I'm just going about. But I do it the best when I jog. There's these lyrics by these people who, yes, they're sublime musically as well as lyrically, but their philosophy is nothing like a pessimistic philosophy. It comes out the most in Serj Tankian, both in his System of a Down lyrics and his own records, which are, I think, pound for pound, track for track. His solo records have better per track performance musically than System of a Down. See, I didn't even think I would go into this. But the reason I referenced him is because I just did this. I just twisted the tail end, lyrically speaking, the tail end of his song, Falling Stars. I think what he sings, it's a very eco-friendly album. His whole career is very eco-friendly. I don't know if he knows about deep ecology, but the lyrics are deep ecology 101. And so the final closing track of that epic record, 2007 record, I think it was called Elect the Dead. He's got the track Falling Stars at the end, and he sings, that which is sought by the few, profit, and that which is sought by the most, peace. And I'm like, yeah, there's a wisdom to that, but people are inconsistent because you can twist that into an existential question. And so the moment I twist that and carry the implications of that into existential questions, to be or not to be, that old chestnut, we might say instead of that which is sought by the few, profit, versus that which is sought by the most, peace. So he wants to halo the great majority and put a little anti-halo effect on the elites, the few, you know, the ruling class. He's very ruling class minded because he's so gushy in terms of the environment and Mother Earth and probably Gaia and certainly deep ecology. So that's his big divide. That which is sought by the few, profit. That which is sought by the most, peace. And so I just changed that and I say, in terms of an existential question, that which is sought by the fool, conquest, versus that which is sought by the wise, peace. Oh, peace. And so what would he say to that? What would any of these radical environmentalists say to that? You choose life and its preservation and immersing yourself in it. To immerse oneself in life is to immerse oneself in the will. The will is blind, irrational, unconscious, and though it is original, if you choose life, life is just interchangeable with will, really. You know, there's different grades of existence, or organized versus unorganized existence. Most eternal form of existence, matter, is the unorganized form. We are the most organized form. And so to the extent that you think we need to fill the earth and a lifeless planet is worse, you are the fool that chooses conquest as opposed to the wise that choose peace. How are you not? How can you only see it when it comes to the mundane question and you do not see the answer of the mundane question paralleling itself as it relates to the existential question? You love peace, but you can't love it existentially. You can only love it when your will is somehow simultaneously served within that peace. But that is just oxymoronic. You serve the will, you do not achieve peace. The will is ever irritable, it is insatiable. Like I said, it wills life for all time, not just within the individual's own lifespan. Hence the individual becomes discombobulated and takes certain concerns that are just the ordinary concerns of the species and twists them into thinking that those are his own concerns. No. So I've done a lot of other kinds of lyrical change-ups. It's usually to make them more pessimistic, especially with these sublime artists. You know, it's a kind of admixture of the pleasant and the unpleasant, and they see beauty in that, but then they often have kids, they often start families, they're not, in a clear way, pessimistic. And so those lyrics, the way they sing, and they come off flat sometimes, and certainly hollow. That which is sought by the few, profit, that which is sought by the most, peace. My ass, that which is sought by the most, peace. No, you got to take it existentially. That which is sought by the fool, conquest, which the will just makes us these conquest agents. You do not innocently immerse yourself in life. No, you are choosing life because in one or another way you're choosing a certain type of conquest. So that which is sought by the fool, conquest, versus that which is sought by the wise, peace. Peace in all these traditions that are so neglected, certainly by the pundit, all these contemplative, usually Eastern contemplative traditions that they can only pay lip service to and forget about the moment we're actually asking tangible questions. Really, deep ecology should despise these various traditions, just existentially speaking. Deep ecology just serves a more primitive form of the will. The will is sacrosanct, maybe not in its most complex forms, like human volition, but pre-human volition, non-human species, ecosystems, you know, the aesthetics of the streams and rivers and the mountains. There's just a pre-rational will. It's clear that it mandates conquests in its own way, hence predation and all the other conflicts within nature. So it's just one example. That which is sought by the fool, conquest, versus that which is sought by the wise, peace. Warrants repeating, bears repeating.
Well, how is this for a brand new kind of twist on a video where the audio that I'm going to launch into as soon as I'm done with the intro here is going to be the very audio where I say at the start as, oh, no, it's not the end of the video. As if I initially planned to tack it on at the end of a video. No, I want to start with it. I'll tell you why I want to start with it. It's because it's a jogging audio, and I just realized I think I speak a tad too fast when I'm just pacing about or walking about, but when I'm doing the audio, I think I'm just winded enough when I'm doing the audio and jogging. I'm just winded enough such that my pace allows me to truly have the appropriate pace for speechifying, as the made-up term goes, for being an orator. I'm a better orator when I jog. I truly just paying attention to this audio that I recorded while jogging. I'll tell you what I was talking about during the audio. I'm not going to spoil it now. I think I described it sufficiently well. It has to do with lyrics and how, it's good to be sublime, but if you're going to feign to be dark lyrically, then be properly dark. Be a pessimist. There, I spoiled it now, what the audio is about. But I just think I have the best possible pace when I'm just winded enough, because the audio is taking place as I'm jogging. So I might start doing more of those. I talk a little too fast when I'm just pacing about and walking and navigating the very loud sections of the city that you're probably having to put up with right now. Sorry about that. I didn't think it'd get this noisy this fast. Let's just start with that audio, which initially I thought this is going at the tail end of a video. But I'm like, God, listening to it back, the pacing, because I'm kind of winded, the pacing is just right. And I emphasize things just right. And of course, now the vehicles are done, now that I want to stop the audio. So, yay. Ruckus. Yay, ruckus. Maybe the ruckus adds an aesthetic to it. I've had some commenters in the past say that, you know what, when it gets when you got to shout a little too loudly, independent of the context, to override the vehicles, that adds an aesthetic to it. So here's more of that aesthetic. I'm on the lift off. Dun dun dun.
You probably need children at some point.
Do we?
That's life.
That's not me, that's me in this video. And I'll explain why I'm playing this video in a few seconds here. Play. Why do I have to? See, I used to be able to just go spacebar and play, but it won't do that anymore. Oh, it will. Sometimes, but not other times.
That's life.
Why aren't you pregnant yet? It's like my self-made knock-knock joke. Knock, knock. Who's there? It's Dennis. Dennis who? Dennis Prager. Ah, Dennis Prager, the nice, friendly, old Jewish man from PragerU. Sure, I'll open the door for you. How's it going, Dennis? Why aren't you pregnant yet?
So around that time, I also recorded additional stuff where I kind of dissed Mr. PragerU. And I didn't want to make this video super long, but why not make the current video super long, but give the next audios, which were recorded around this time, give them a bit of a introductory vibe by playing this little jokey segment at the tail end of this video. So there we go. It is not an ideal recording location by any stretch of the imagination. I'm gonna have to go ahead and record because, God damn it, I was thinking we ought to do a 3 cheers for anti-natalism. At least I will. Not on the activist front. Ugh, no. There will be no cheers for that, win or lose, from me certainly. No, but on the theoretical front, there's a kind of necessary and a long overdue 3 cheers for anti-natalism, because remember how a decade ago, and even beyond that, we were being told that there were no natalists. We were just battling these phantoms where it is them who inspire to pass themselves off as phantoms. I wrote about this a lot. I was so sore about this for the longest time. From about, I think, 2010 all the way through 2016. I was just so sore over the fact that there were these phantoms who called themselves anti-natalists and who wouldn't identify as natalists. And then we were told, we were kind of, to use the hokey term, we were gaslit ideologically, not me, maybe some anti-natalists were, into compliance along with that framing. And I remember other anti-natalists used anti-natalist in a respectful manner. I never did this. I just always understood there was a spectrum here. You couldn't cheat by pretending that you were outside this spectrum and you had no attitudes, when it was so clear people had attitudes. And I think, just thinking how I ended the video with Dennis Prager, why aren't you pregnant yet? It's just so seamless. It's now so seamless within that discourse. It sums up the attitude. Why aren't you pregnant yet? Sums up the attitude
we always had natalists with us. They were just more covert. There's nothing covert about it anymore, and thus, at least, anti-natalism, as I view it, deserves a kind of 3 cheers on a theoretic level. We're not battling phantoms. There were just people who were covert about what they believed. But even getting the mildest stagnation on a societal level, the mildest procreative stagnation, look what a frenzy, ideological frenzy and intellectual bankruptcy it sends them into. It's so true. It's so true. How Shaw put it, this is just the species exerting its own will over the individual will. The individual mind, certainly. They line right up like lemmings. They're will lemmings. The Prager use of the world and company. And the most crucial of add-ons, just personally, if there's been a single driving force that's gotten me out of listening to podcasts, it's this. It's because this concern over fertilities in decline, what I call procreative stagnation, because it's a much better way of putting it, but fertility in decline. Every single podcaster, from the most wonkish one, like the Ezra Kleins of the world, just nods along to this when it is presented as a concern. On first blush, he just nods along. From the most wonkish, like him, to the most comedic, like Bill Burr. I can't listen to any of these people's podcasts anymore because this type of thing has just come up one too many times, and they just mindlessly portray it as something to be concerned over. And they won't bring on a single guest who'll give them the least bit of pushback. It's like, I just can't. I just quit. And so even the non-fervent natalists are too unquestioning in terms of their natalism. Bill Burr's not a fervent person in terms of that position, even though he ended up having a kid. It's another reason why I had to stop listening to the podcast. There was just too much my kid talk. I couldn't take it. Ezra has also had a kid, coincidentally, right at the same time. See, before I started recording, I didn't even realize these two guys. I view him as the most wonkish that I used to listen to and not miss an episode, and I viewed Bill as the most comedic, filler and all. He had the most per minute comedic punch, so I kind of listened to his podcast regularly up until he had the kid. But two kind of giants in the wonkish and the comedic space, non-fervent. They're natalists, but they're not fervent about it the way a Prager and a Peterson is. But nonetheless, they're just so unquestioning, and they won't bring anyone on who'll make him question it a little. It's so damn tedious. But then it's doubly so for the fervent ones. But those are the ones that I like to mock more. Hence, maybe more knock-knock jokes to come.
I've only caught snippets of this, but he's gotten worse, and it seems that his blood pressure rises with each decent point Destiny makes. But here's just a bit.
I don't trust them. I look at the blood data.
First of all, you have to trust third parties to some extent.
I don't have to trust
Yes,
them.
you do. You do every day. When you turn the keys in your car, you hope your engine doesn't explode. When you're drinking water, you hope that the public water or whatever tap or bottled water you got it out of isn't contaminated or poisoned with cholera.
I don't
when
do
you
that
get
as
Are those veins popping? I mean, it's just such a simple point, and he thinks he can dig in his heels. And, well, I think he knows he's in for a long night.
consequence of consensus.
Of course you do.
No, I don't. I do that as a consequence of observing multiple times that when I put the god's key in the ignition, the truck started.
Why do you know it's going to start the 50th or the 100th time? How many times do you wear the...
with me.
I'm
You
not
don't
playing
know.
Hume. You don't know if the denim in those jeans isn't leaking into your bloodstream. To some extent, we have to trust third-party institutions to make
Except when they
determination.
use force. Stop.
When they use force. We trust the police officers. We trust the judicial system.
We do. We on the left trust the police.
Textbook derangement, making it about a huge chunk that's vaguely defined, right? Just take the average Biden voter. You think the average Biden voter doesn't trust the police? Give me a fucking break. It's just so sad to see just how far down he's... And again, just all kinds of maneuvering so that now what they debated up until a second ago is going to be forgotten about, because now it's about this, vague entity, the left. They never say, like, how many millions or tens of millions of people are they talking about? It's just, they trade on vagueness.
Do it. If somebody's breaking
That's
into your
why
house,
we
who do you
defund
follow?
them.
I'm not a defunder, but if somebody's breaking into your house, you can be the most...
No, Destiny, you are a defunder because you have to account for the defunders. because he likes his composition fallacies and he won't be told otherwise. He can't function without them.
Be fun person in the world. Who are you going to call? Are you going to call your neighbor? Are you going to call Joe Biden? Are you going to call Obama? Are you going to call the Black Panthers? You're going to call the Confused.
So tell me this. Tell me this then.
Well, I'll say something else about it, because there was another clip I was looking for it, but I can't find it now. But he brought up the fear of the communists and the similarities to the climate. You know, and you could even believe that the climate crowd is alarmist, but then just these lax analogies. Found it. Not gonna play the whole thing, but I'll play it early on just to do the proper setup.
I mean, I'm not going to tell you that every model is perfect.
They're
but
not
right now,
perfect.
sure, but right now we're like standing in traffic with our eyes closed saying the car hasn't hit me yet, so I don't think there's any coming. I think it's pretty undeniable at this point that there is an impact on climate across the planet. I
think that's highly deniable. We have no idea what the impact is from. We don't know where the carbon dioxide is from.
So
we
he
can't
goes
measure
on,
the warming
he
of the
goes on,
ocean.
he goes on.
For the movement of the urban areas, planning to measure. This isn't data. This is guess. And there's something weird underneath it. There's something weird that isn't oriented well towards human beings underneath it. It has this guise of compassion. Oh, we're going to save the poor in the future. It's like that's what the bloody communists said. And they killed a lot of people doing it. And we're walking down that same road now with this insistence that, you know, we're so compassionate that we care about the poor 100 years from now. And if we have to wipe out several 100 million of them now, well, that's a small price to pay for the future utopia. And we've heard that sort of thing before. And the alternative to that is to stop having global level elites plot out a utopian future or even an anti-dystopian future. And that's exactly what's happening now with organizations like the WEF. And if this...
You know, if, like, every now and then you get really stoned and you just kind of stare at the clouds take the form of actual faces or some other kinds of, you know, familiar shapes. You just see shapes where none actually exist. Maybe for some people, I heard from some people, they don't even need to get stoned. They just stare at the clouds enough, and the clouds, you know, you recognize something in them, right? So it's like, even when I'm stoned and I see shapes, I know what I'm seeing is not reality. And so with someone like Peterson, that's what he does ideologically. He's this ideological cloud starer, and he thinks the shapes that he is seeing, like this, you know, resemblance, anytime you try to have a massive project to impact the future, you're inevitably doing what the commies did. It's kind of like the person who just stares at the clouds and actually thinks that, you know, he sees smiles and frowns and whatnot. That's my takeaway.
To save the poor in the future. It's like that's what the bloody communists said.
God, these are all things I should have said, but I wrote them out. But like the first time, I think in memory, I instead of just saying stuff, I just write it out, and then I make my cloud point, the cloud Peterson as cloud starer, that's what he is, and as cloud shape recognizer. But then like I just record so often now that I even record when I'm tired. So all these things I remember to write out after I recorded the clip instead of say it throughout. But yeah, there were plenty of pro-sacrificial attitudes throughout, for example, the Industrial Revolution, and as is the norm for not just him, but his whole enterprise, his employer and many such employers, they just completely turned their brains off, or there's something where they're incapable of recognizing. And look, it's not like the Industrial Revolution was as bad as kind of the, you know, Ukraine famines and stuff like that. But the Industrial Revolution did sacrifice a lot of people who were normies in their own kind of way back then, and that they couldn't do their normie stuff anymore. They had to do this whole different stuff. They had to live in the slums. And, you know, we never think of the Industrial Revolution as a thing that sacrificed a lot of people. We just kind of go, well, it was rough, but it's okay because now we live better because of it. But it's like, if you're going to make these kinds of points, you have to see different shape clouds, not just the kind of shape clouds that you're maybe instinctually prone to remark on. But there's these other ones, like the Industrial Revolution, and all these long-termist projects that are worried about X risk.
And they killed a lot of people doing it. And we're walking down that same road now. That's a small price to pay for the future utopia. And we've heard that sort of thing before.
Yes, we have.
And the alternative to that is for a dystopian future. And
Yes.
that's exactly what's happening now with organizations like the WEF. And if this...
You know, if like, yeah, so the point about cloud staring. So yeah, I just record a little too often these days, and I record when I'm tired. And so for the first time ever, I think, I have to write stuff out in text instead of being sharp enough to say it as the clip is being played. So I'll try to record less, or at least I'll try to record only when my noggin is sharp enough to reply to every single stupid thing he said. But here I just kind of wanted to make my quasi-comedic point about him being the cloud-shaped recognizer. And he is. Out of context fun.
Hated us does not justify anything. You do a peace deal with the people who hate you. You don't do it with the people who love you. So this lunatic standard of, I will not do a peace deal until the Palestinians love me, is just total bullshit.
It's not about them loving you. It's about you have the way that you do peace deals is by eliminating their will to fight. That is how a peace deal is done.
God.
If they still want to fight,
murder destiny.
how many died in World War II? How many Soviet citizens were killed by the Germans? How many Nazis were killed? How many German citizens were killed in the Dresden bombings? How many Japanese people were killed in the Tokyo bombings? No, you're talking about.
You just said it.
Okay.
I want to murder no Israelis. Never.
None. Okay. So in World War II, you would have negotiated peace with Nazi Germany. Is that what you would have wanted to do?
You know what? Sometimes you just turn the volume off and you watch the gesticulations, or if you can read lips, sometimes it's fun, but I should probably just edit and ignore all these things. Yes, I've got a lot of editing to do.
For you, for peace, the only thing you can say is murder, evil, immoral, 150, dead every day, evil, US, not good, don't support evil, but like even what you're saying here, don't support Israel anymore as the United States. What do you think Israel would do if they didn't have the support of the United States? We might be one of the only partners that are actually reining them in, which we have. It's why we've encouraged them to slow down.
I feel like a freak sometimes speaking really fast in my videos and stuff, but holy hell.
Their strikes. That's why we've encouraged them to allow humanitarian aid in. We're probably one of the only people that Israel will actually listen to when it comes to curbing the violence that happens against Palestinians. I think that there needs to be an actual conversations around Israel.
I'm never gonna, after learning of this guy, I'm never gonna feel bad about speaking really fast online ever again, because I don't.
Pundits, like actually talking about realistic peace plans and not just repeating these like talking points over and over again of like 150 dead, 150 dead. That doesn't get us anywhere. We've never thought about any conflict like that ever.